Hi, everyone, and welcome to your final performance assignment of the semester. We are going to be intertexting, resisting the text. A very basic definition of intertexting is breaking up a single text with others. So you create a conversation, which can be a dialogue, a reinforcement of opinion, but the most important part of this is that we can tell that there is more than one voice in the script, that this is a cultural conversation, not a unified text like it was during our prose and lyrical units. In this way, we get to trace how human beings build on their personal understanding through interweaving different cultural texts together that affirm what we already know and believe, and also challenge, resist these things, and come up with new ideas. Now, when I first took this course back in 1999 at my undergraduate institution, intertexting was not in the 100 level course. Over time, it has been added by many different professors, and that's because we live in an intertexting society. Memes are often intertext. They're all over the internet, all over our social media. I have here two iconic pieces. And it doesn't really matter what the words on them are because they've become to mean an emotion, a feeling that we can then intertext into any situation. Beyonce stunned that her country album just won Album of the Year. And so anytime that we are stunned, surprised, not quite sure if what happened really happened, we insert this picture of Beyonce and it captures how we're feeling. The same thing with this very old photo of Gene Wilder from a movie from the 1970s. Many people have not seen the movie, but they do know that that still from the movie means condescending, means that you aren't taking someone very seriously, that you're rolling your eyes at whatever they're saying, and you can put any words with that face, with Beyonce's face, and we are now surprised, unsure, or confident and condescending. Now, the important thing to understand, remember, we're getting Living in Our Diverse Nation credit for this course, is that nothing in our culture happens in a vacuum. Everything builds on previous understandings. So as you create these intertext scripts and then perform them for us, you are remembering that idea that even when we put fixed words on the page, as soon as we publish them, as soon as we give them to other people, they can insert their own ideas, their own beliefs, their own words into our intended meanings, making completely new ideas, completely new scripts, just like Beyonce and Gene Wilder can be inserted into any situation and their face is now tied to that new thing. We can do the same thing every time we interrupt a text with another. I want to talk about this particular performance that happened at the 2025 Super Bowl with Kendrick Lamar. Now, in this particular performance, he did the Super Bowl halftime show, and there was all these different images throughout it. And me, as someone who didn't know a whole lot about Kendrick Lamar, watched it and realized there was significant cultural references. He was intertexting lots of understandings, even if I didn't know all of them. Now, I recognize that his dancers were choreographed to be an American flag. I noticed they were in what looked like prison jumpsuits, and I learned later how that was a critique of our prison system. I noticed how he was very close to and had protective posture with his Black women singers. Found out later that idea that Black women need protecting in our society. I had never watched Squid Games that talks about class warfare. So the references, the costuming, the positioning that reference Squid Games, that intertexting got by me, though I could tell there was more to it, that there was an intertext happening. Also, the back and forth with Uncle Sam and Kendrick Lamar talking about, are we going to oppress people, make them conform to our beliefs, or can Kendrick Lamar defy that and be the black man that he wants to be in society and as a singer and a star? So as we watch this, know that sometimes we can sense there's an intertext going on, even if we aren't sure of what the cultural reference is. It can inspire us to then go find out. But overall, an intertext performance is most powerful when the audience has enough reference that they understand what that intertext is entailing. Now, there are certain stories that we really, as a culture, grab onto, ones that go with us. Now, because this is a Living in Our Diverse Nation course, let's focus on some of those courses, those different stories that are in the U.S. One of those stories is a rise to greatness. A lot of people are immigrants to the United States. Unless you are part of one of the indigenous cultures, you are the descendant of immigrants or people who were brought here against their will for slavery. And so there is this idea that the United States has a story about the rise to greatness. People coming here with nothing and achieving everything, achieving all of their dreams. That American dream stays with us deeply, right? And it is ingrained into our culture so that people always think they can transcend where they are. Now, do statistics tell us this is actually much more difficult to do than perhaps we think it is? Yes, but that doesn't mean that stories about coming from nothing and achieving everything resonate deeply with us in the U.S. Also, the ideas of tales of loss, of tragedy, that living vicariously through others' sorrow attracts Americans, right? Murder podcasts, stories of true crime. We like living vicariously of that dangerous world while staying safe with us. Those stories often sell. People want to hear more of them. Also, we are a culture that does not have a long tradition of arranged marriages. For that reason, that fairy tale romance, our one true love, is deeply in us, that we like those stories. Of course, we also push back. You can think of movies like Shrek and Frozen that show that the love at first sight, the idea that there is one prince and princess meant to be with us and we will know when we see them, is critiqued in these stories. Now, we remember that overall we make sense of ourselves and others through these stories that we tell. So oftentimes we embrace, we're like, this is a story for me. This is a story I return to. I resonate deeply with it. Other time we resist it. We say, that story's not true. I don't believe that story to be a reflection of the reality I live. So as we move with reiterating, embracing, rejecting different stories, intercutting them with our own lived experience and other stories, we are doing identity. We are doing culture. We are making meaning. And that's why in this way, as we affirm and resist stories, it is a way of doing public discourse, of doing culture, of creating who we are with others, both individually and collectively. Now, oftentimes, when we are creating intertext, students can get a little anxious of, well, what if I'm not doing what was intended? And it's so important that you embrace this idea of I am creating an entirely new conversation, a new meaning that maybe none of these authors could have ever anticipated. So you need to just be open to this idea of cutting into texts, interrupting them, making new understandings. When Shauna McDonald, who I'm quoting here, wrote this, she was working at Villanova University. Her students felt a little resistant to this idea. But I find at UNCW, students are very open to it. Students are excited of this idea to create a conversation they find meaningful to them. And I have lots of examples up on our Canvas site for you to look at to get inspired and some ideas of how to do that well. So here's what you are going to do. You are going to interject the voice of one text into another. You will do individual lines, phrases, sentences to move through. You want to make sure you're going back and forth between the texts at least 4 times to make sure it's a dialogue. And in this way, we can perhaps have meanings that transform how we understand the world in general, but definitely how we understand those 2 texts at the very least. I think of some students who have interrupted love songs with statistics of stalking, students who have interrupted Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech with Barack Obama's acceptance speech of the president nomination, and live Reddit tweets, live Reddit posts and tweets that were talking in negative ways about Barack Obama. They were saying racist things to say we have a dream, and in this moment it can feel achieved while there's still this resistance that racism continues and perpetuates. So all these ways, think about the cultural conversation you want. I've had students do pieces that focused on statistics of global warming with different news pieces that said global warming wasn't real. So you can have all these different ways of having a conversation between 2 texts. Okay, all right, let's keep moving through to make sure you know exactly what is going to happen for this assignment. You need to have at least 2 different texts that offer different perspectives or complement each other, reiterating, saying even more than one voice feels this way. I've had students do this, having different perspectives on falling in love. Both are falling in love, but they have different words, different ways of doing this. At least one of these texts needs to be published. It can be a book, it can be a published poem, it can be published song lyrics, it can be a published research article or a news article. Now, you can have both of them that, or you can look and have one of them perhaps be a public Facebook post. It might be from X, it might be from Reddit, but make sure you don't do anyone's private Facebook posts or private or any sort of private communication. It has to be for public consumption to include in this assignment. So once you have these 2 pieces, or more if you want more than 2, you will then create a script. So you will go back and forth. You will make sure you make that script in a way that we can see and trace the different texts through it. You will then make sure you create of where your pauses are going to be, your emotional intent, how you're going to be interacting with the camera, and then you will record it via a Velfie and you will upload it to YouTube through the instructions like you have for your first 2 assignments. And you will give an oral defense that cites at least 2 references. One is going to be one of your class readings, and one will be a reference that you find from outside of class. And you, of course, will use your reference analysis to talk about that second reference that you found. So it has to be at least 4 minutes. It has to have at least 2 texts. One must be published. It has to have an introduction that draws your audience in, introduces you and the texts and your intent for this performance. You will have a defense that articulates what we learn about cultural experience and identities depicted from 2 citations, one from in class, one from out, your external reference evaluation, and you're going to make a backdrop or a cover or a poster that has a title and your name in addition to an image that captures your performance. Think of it as a flyer or a poster to draw people into your performance. And don't worry, Adobe Spark is very easy to use. It also goes by Adobe Express, and you will be able to draw us in and help us understand digitally what we are about to experience. If you have any questions, always reach out. I love to hear from you. Thanks so much. Bye.